So, hello everyone. Welcome to Guidance of Governance, Empowering Ethical Decision Making in XR. Today, we're discussing this topic with Alina Kobluski and Melissa, and we're going live now. So, this session is the third in a series of live discussions where the authors and contributors to the XR Human Code of Conduct discuss in detail the thinking and processes that have led to the current draft. In the previous two sessions, we focused on the purpose and intent of the Code of Conduct and then the challenges of choosing the right terms and language when writing it. Today, in this session, we will focus on how this Code of Conduct is to be used, how it fits into the landscape of regulation and practice, and how to make it future-proof for risks and challenges that we can anticipate. Okay, so let's discuss about Excel for Human. Excel for Human, I'm going to show you the website. Right. Excel for Human is a 3-year EU-funded project with the mission to co-create living guidance documents on ethical and related policy, regulatory governance, and interoperability issues of XR technologies. And it has been developed during this program, the Code of Conduct. That I'm going to show you here, and I'm going to also put the link in the comments. This is the Code of Conduct. Code of Conduct is current draft. You can find the current draft in the link that I'm going to share in the comments in a moment. It's arranged with a distinct section for principles, which are high-level topics and articles, which are meant to be more applicable to specific use cases and decisions that designer and developers may have to make. You can discuss, and we actually would like to hear your feedback on the Code of Conduct that today we're going to address in this conversation through the XR for Human Forum. I'm going to show you now the XR for Human Forum. It's this one here. And the XR for Human Forum is a platform for ethical discussions for stakeholders, both from the industry and academia, as well as the public and policymakers. There are multiple topics and distinct discussion threads, including one dedicated specifically to exchanging questions, thoughts, and opinions about the Code of Conduct. Okay, today we're going to discuss about these platforms and most of all the Code of Conduct with Alina Kadlubski from OpenAI Cloud and Melissa Amoros-Lark from Leiden University. Alina, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Alina. I'm Managing Director of OpenAI Cloud Europe and a Research Associate of the Virtual Technologies Department of Applied Science University Mittweida. Really happy to be here and provide, together with Melissa, some more insights into the draft Code of Conduct.
And Melissa, maybe would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Yes, so I'm Melissa. I'm a project manager. I work at the Leiden Learning and Innovation Center, mostly working on innovation topics from implementation to just looking into what comes next for the university.
Thank you. Can you also, Melissa, share with us what has happened with the XR for Human project? What is the stage and the status right now, and what has been achieved until now?
Yes, of course. So we are on year 3, so time flies. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we got to the Code of Conduct, which is one of the major output deliverables. There's other ones, but today we're talking about the Code of Conduct, so I'll do a little bit about how we got there. Mostly how we got to the Code of Conduct is by working on a previous deliverable, which was 5.1. Where we essentially looked at all the work that was done in the previous deliverables. I'm talking a lot about deliverables, but we were looking at areas like ethics, areas like policy and law, as well as interoperability, and seeing that all in a larger sort of context of what the challenges and what the risks were for extended reality, and then looking at actionable solutions. So we did this work bringing together all the work from our previous work, but also looking at doing interviews with specific stakeholders, as well as using the forum, the XR forum, to gather more feedback and sort of see the applicability and how the proposed solutions were fit for purpose. So based on that, one of the many solutions that we had to the many challenges that exist in this field was, of course, having a code of conduct to guide the way that developers work with this technology to make sure that it's as ethical as possible.
Amazing. Let's start the conversation. So today we're discussing guidance or governance. Where do you personally feel that XR for Humans code of conduct should fall along that spectrum? Should the code inspire values, enforce standards? What do you think? I want to hear your opinions.
First of all, I'd like to add, if people are curious about the in-depth work, all the deliverables and the intersections between work packages are all under open research, and all this pool of knowledge is accessible through the website via Zenodo. So if audience members are curious about some specific topics, just go to our website, and you are then led to the Zenodo platform and can really dive through a huge portfolio of knowledge that's been gathered throughout the 3 years that then led to the code of conduct. Just as an add-on, if people are curious, I think, you find a lot of information there that could be of use for your production.
And by the way, you can find, if you're joining on LinkedIn, the links in the comments. So please have a look at the XR for Human forum and the code of conduct link as well. So the code of conduct aims to empower designers and developers to make decisions. What does empowerment mean in the context of ethical decision-making for designer and developers for virtual worlds? Which of you would like to answer this question? Melissa, maybe?
Yeah, of course. So I think of empowerment as having access to really easy to use tools that allow them to make really practical and easy decisions. I think something as lofty as ethics is sometimes really hard to understand what it actually means in practice. But what we hope to do with this code of conduct is really demystify that, and very concretely in terms of course, the values that we're following for the preamble and the principles, but also in the articles of what that could look like for developers that are using this code of conduct. So as a developer, you're not going to be an ethics professional, and we totally understand that. So that's why we've really tried to go deep into what it actually means and how to make it really practical. So what systems, checklists, ethic prompts, sort of what are the best practices that they can have access to, and make it easy for them to start thinking of ethics from the start of any development project, and also throughout the development cycle. So not something that just comes at the end, but rather something like looking at human-centered design, something that you look at through the whole cycle. We're really wanting to see ethics by design applied through the whole development cycle as well.
Amazing. And Alina, what does empowerment look like in practice for a professional working at a small studio versus one working at a large enterprise? Do you think there are differences between the two?
Most definitely, and I would even argue that these are building blocks that are not linear. So it's really also dependent on what you're working on. I would even argue some of the articles, for instance, if you go to art, to some of the articles, or even the guiding principles. Some are more easier to achieve than others from a technical perspective, especially if you look at bystanders, for instance. We have this bullet point: provide clear and understandable communication about the digital and non-digital nature of immersive environments. So here, this clause, I would even argue, is vital, but especially that some users should that we provide a distinction, especially from UX design, what is real and what's not real. And this is even so crucial regarding emerging variables, and also the convergence of technology, for instance, with biometrical infused data, seeing is believing, and potential harm. So some of the articles and even overarching principles that we are addressing, some are more easier to achieve, some are more critical, and some are even more for future emerging risks that we see emerging due to convergence of technologies and production workflows. So some are more becoming more crucial in the far future. So we should already sort of equip ourselves and establish mechanisms for safe production workflows. So yeah.
Do you think, to build up on that, that the differences in their autonomy or influence on decision making change how the code of conduct may empower them?
Yeah, I would even argue to also think more in building blocks, and also ensure based on what because we are dealing with context-based technology. So also ensure that future legislation is striving towards that and enhances that, because these technologies already influence society today. So even the educational component is quite important also in our project, the education of producers, but also users in general.
Of course. So about that, I have a question. How can organization apply the idea of context-aware decision-making that you were just mentioning? And are there tools, checklists, or methods being proposed alongside the code of conduct to help us assess how to use the code of conduct for each context? We were saying that this is the user experience library with its rating system. Maybe Alina and Melissa, you want both to discuss on this? And I can put it on the screen as well, by the way, so that people can see the user library and while we're here. Here we go.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's what we're working on, right? Is that the code of conduct should not be standalone, but all of the products that we have as the output of the project are very much interconnected, and that we hope that the experiences that are in the library are some of them that follow the examples of what a good XR production would be, and one that follows the principles and the articles that are outlined in the code of conduct. So yes, we're working on that, and more to come.
Yeah, and also there are internal discussions too. As we all know, with the AI Act, there's an AI checker. So even in regards of the context of the code of conduct, we are also parallel working on a checklist as well here, to make it more hands-on usable as an add-on to the code of conduct.
Nice. And also, so we have the code of conduct, we have the experience library. So we have a lot of different tools that people can use to make ethical XR content. But how is the code of conduct applied? Like, is it like a fixed code of conduct? Like, is it flexible? Like, how are you planning for people to use it?
I think Alina has talked a little bit about the concept of sort of building blocks and sort of seeing where you are, and of course the sector that you're developing experiences for. If you're developing experiences, say in a medical setting versus at a school or a social game experience, you have very different users, you have very different responsibilities, and that we hope that the code of conduct will allow developers to think through more of where they are and also their responsibilities that are that sort of context-specific decisions. For example, in the medical sector, we're going to have all sorts of information, of sensitive information, physiological information that is being collected, and a higher standard at which everything has to be set versus a social experience. I think it's the same as an educational setting, or for example, with workers using an XR experience to, for example, do their training, right? Especially if you're looking at a place where there's a lot of hierarchy and consent is difficult, it also should establish an extra set of responsibilities that should come from the developer side to make sure that it's as ethical, as safe, as well developed as possible.
And you were saying, so building blocks, but what will happen to the code of conduct once the Except for Human project reaches completion? Because it's going to end in a few months, am I correct?
In roughly 6 months, yes.
6 months, okay. And how do you envision the kind of content evolution after the project is going to be done?
I mean, our outcome is, or our legacy is heavily then influenced or further advanced by various initiatives of the Commission, and probably also in regards to follow-up funded projects. So I think there are various initiatives in regards to, for instance, the VR/AR Industrial Coalition from the Commission, but also this new alliance that is currently built. So where our outcome is heavily feeding into even the European toolbox. So this could also maybe be a potential part of it. But I would argue this is a continuous flow, and more or less that is really heavily influenced by by how the EU Commission wants to continue and further advance the virtual world initiatives in general.
Yes, of course.
And to also add to that, as somebody that has worked in previous procurement for tools as part of the digital learning environment of the university, when a company takes privacy seriously, when they take security seriously, when they have all their ducks in a row, that really sort of opens your door into procurement processes. So we also hope that the code of conduct can be that bottom-up approach where developers can really be inspired to do this, and hopefully it's something that that procurement also values. So that's also another area that we're looking into.
Nice.
Yeah, I think you're making a good point, Melissa, because at the end, it's also about adoption by creators and the industry itself. So that's why also the feedback of our listeners, but the broader community is so important. So the more feedback we get for things that we might have missed on what can be approved, the more feedback we get, the higher up it becomes, and the more applicable also this draft version of the code of conduct becomes. So I think everyone in the European XR industry or community could also influence the legacy by their contribution.
So because of that, I'm going to put the QR codes so that people can also not only in the comments, but also here in the video on YouTube to scan the QR code to read the code of conduct. But I want to build up on that. So because we don't know what's going to happen after Except for Human is going to end, and if the European Commission wants to pursue in updating the code of conduct, depending on what's going to also to happen with the XR industry in general, because of all these new initiatives, including the Virtual World Partnership, I think like the code of conduct that you are creating is what you have created, and you're still like improving it and making like the final retouchments. It has to be future-proof and try to last as much as possible, so that if no other initiative is going to be able to update it and make it more, even more relevant for what's going to happen in the future. Like, how do you plan to make it future proof? And what does it mean also for an emerging technology like XR? Melissa, maybe?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think what we try to do when developing the code of conduct is to really make it value-based. Values are not something that change day to day, unlike technology, which keeps advancing every day. So we really hope that having that strong ethics base, having that strong legal policy and technical base with the interoperability coming into play will make it not necessarily an evergreen code of conduct, but one that stands the test of time. So we really want to highlight that because all of the work that we've done in the background, we hope that it can really be valuable for quite a long time. And something to highlight is that, of course, we're talking about XR technologies, but it's also like not necessarily specific to the hardware or the software that we have in place, but rather it's really about the process and the development and how all of the articles may be applicable at all of these stages.
Alina, maybe? Do you want to add something?
I would even argue it's in the essence and the mix of the articles and principles by itself. So depending, for instance, some might be harder to achieve, especially since we're striving towards variables which are gathering data. So here bystanders, probably this is a more technical, challenging act on the hardware, but even on the software side. So these might be, important parts that need to be worked on various levels in the next couple of years. Others might be a bit more easier to achieve depending on what you're working on. So I think the mix of emerging risks and state of the art reflects or mirrors the code of conduct. So, and as Melissa touched upon, we are been looking at outcomes from various areas, from ethics to governance, privacy, to interoperability, and looking at what are intersections, and then having this sort of proactive approach. And here also to not formulate it negatively, but try to add the positive touch. So arguing that every creator has responsibility. So it's also about the awareness of making them aware that whatever they produce, they have responsibility for themselves, but also for the people that are using it. And so even just making them aware of potential things that could happen is important. And even having this awareness is already a key achievement.
And exactly. And then also just to add is that we also have a giant forest of legislation that is applicable to XR, right? Everybody talks about the Digital Services Act or GDPR, but there's a whole load of other legislation that is applicable, and it's very much a patchwork, that's the word, where there's a lot of things that are already established, but also that there are plenty of gaps as well. So we hope that this initiative will help guide developers into thinking of maybe there isn't established law on this, but this can be a way to set standards by the industry, a way for the industry to develop things that hopefully can then be codified into law, right? So how does it work for them, and how can that translate into law afterwards, rather than law being in a position and then not knowing how to handle it, right? And that's why we see that these value-based standards can really contribute to that.
Beautiful. So we have the XR for Human Forum, which is a platform where users can give feedback on the code of conduct and can also ask questions about the code of conduct, how it's working, and what are the principles and everything. And there was a question that came through the XFUM forum that was about having children in XR. What are the risks? Should children go in XR? We know the European Commission stated that the limit should be for virtual worlds at least above 13. Sometimes in some platforms, though, it is 18. So what do you think about this specific topic? And we will go through some more specific topics after this. Alina, maybe?
I think personally, in particular, since the brains of children in particular are still being developed, I think it's really key that we educate parents and their responsibility of the well-being of their children. As you know, with every emerging technology, we don't yet have the valid data of long-term potential risks. So this is just a precaution method. Obviously, we've all known and been in experiences where children are around, and we've all seen this over on virtual platforms being shared. So we all know that they are there, and they are a big market for the XR industry, especially when it comes to games. So I think it's really about the education here and about the awareness that, that we have a responsibility here, especially since we are not aware of potential long-term physical, but also other harms that could cause. Especially for people or users that have certain restraints like ADHD, some experiences could actually enforce these things, and even being in rooms where people had strokes and stuff. So I think just being awareness and education is key here.
Absolutely. Yeah, Melissa, maybe you want to talk more about education. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to kind of name a couple of risks that we found in our body of work, anything from manipulation, emotional tracking, data harvesting, identity confusion. These are only some of the risks that it's not just children that use the technology, but also all adults that use the technology, right? So these are very serious risks that require a lot of attention. And especially in 5.1, we've also highlighted the responsibility that funding agencies have towards making sure that there's funding for this type of research. Alina has highlighted that it's a new technology, we don't have the research yet. So it's about funding bodies also making sure that there's enough funding that is reserved to make sure that the risks are also studied, and based on that we can have good type of advice for how to use the technology.
Let me put up the 5.1 so that people have a reference to the code of conduct here. So what about education? How do you plan the code of conduct can help educate users in using XR as well? Because it's not just for developers and for creating XR, but also how to use it. Am I correct?
Yeah, I mean, for instance, if one looks at article, give me 1 second.
Ready to move here.
Wait. For instance, if you go to an article 3 and the first one, and especially if you highlight and data captured by them during usage, I think this is a really important point. And I think either developers, not even enough users are aware of the data that they are creating while usage. And here also, immersive technologies gather the data via users, and then actually commercially exploit these through their cooperation. So as in the case of, for instance, Niantic, users should be made aware of possible harms. So even you become a minion of capturing data while usage. So I think this is really under communicated how much data you are producing while while usage. I mean, there is this Stanford paper that in less than 10 seconds using the Metaverse Quest, that's not just only your geo localization can be encoded, but also down to the user. So this is how precise these technologies are, and they are really harvesting data. So, and I think this is really under communicated. And so there are really detailed, and this is just one example, and of also education factor and where this is falling short. But maybe Melissa, you have something to add on this.
Yeah, so I think in terms of education, we can also think about the use in education sectors, right? That if we are bringing an XR experience to the classroom, that we are making sure that it is as safe as possible, that there are as much as you can consent, right? If you're in a powerful dynamic, it might not be consent, but how can you actually make sure that it's of value? How can you make sure that you're using the devices and, for example, use them by many people? So then that confuses the tracking, right? So there's a lot of different ways that you can make sure that you're introducing the technology in a safe way to actually have it be valuable in the classroom. And then to also make sure that as a teacher that is using the technology, that you're actually getting the feedback from the users to make sure if it has been valuable to their educational experience, right? When we talk about a technology like XR, developing the applications is a costly process. The hardware is also a costly process, right? So if we're making these investments, that it has to really add value. And this is, without even looking at the privacy security concerns. So that's also something that, at least within the university, we also think it's very important to highlight.
So I have a question here, because we were saying that it's very context-based, the code of conduct, and it looks very different depending on the XR use case. As applied on your educational or social, like it looks very different, as you were also just saying, Melissa. So looking particularly at Article 5.4 here on the screen, which is about appropriate avatar customization. It seems like determining what is appropriate is going to be influenced by users according to the context and their community or culture. So we're talking still about context, but in a different way. So how might this article practically guide a designer or developer in creating an avatar that is appropriate? Maybe Alina? Or Melissa?
I'm just thinking, you got me on the spot.
I have a couple of thoughts that I can start with, and then Alina, if you want to jump in, if we're thinking of an avatar, it can be a very literal representation of what people look in real life, or it can be something that is, green alien, right? So we also have to think about how direct the representation is, and if we are thinking of one-to-one representation of people, that we have to make sure that developers are, of course, talking with sectors of society that are usually less represented, and make sure that that there's inclusive features that are included as a default and not as an afterthought, right? If we want to be representative of identity, we also have to make sure that it is representative.
And, well, Alina, do you want to say something on this?
I have one quick thing, though, is that we also have to respect people's wanting to be anonymous, right, as well. So there's that balance of, do you want to be super representative, but also people have a right to be anonymous in some contexts. So how can we also do both of those things at the same time?
I mean, if you directly sort of interpret even the first sentence of that article, I would argue that also it's important about safe creation. So one could say, are there representations that might not be allowed? For instance, certain types in history, for instance, some evil, some criminals, certain, because at the end we want to create safe environments. And this is really dependent on the platform owners to ensure that the users are in a safe environment. We know the BBC, some journalists from the BBC enhanced, for instance, on Rec Room, some sexual back rooms and even misuse on sexual abuse, and even leading to even more criminal activities. So one also needs to be aware that these technologies, even though we are preaching and want to create a better future for all, it's also a backdoor for criminal activities. And everybody who's hosting platforms or producing contents needs to be aware that it can be used for good, but also there's always this other room, this this other dark side of the technology. And that part of society should also not be kept out in these discussions, and that's why they are also present in the code of conduct itself.
We were discussing, me and Michael, about this because we created, and you can have a look on LinkedIn and YouTube. Unfortunately, LinkedIn is shortening our videos to 30 minutes, but we had a very long discussion about identity and avatars, the relationship between a user and the identity they have with the avatars, because some people, they feel different when they embody a different avatar. So I think this conversation was very long with Michael. So you can have a look at that video if you want to explore our personal opinions on this. But that was very interesting, Alina and Melissa. Thank you so much. Let's discuss dangers. So we're seeing a rapid development with AI integration into XR. How flexible is the code of conduct when it comes to emerging tech like generative avatars, motion tracking, or haptic feedback systems, and also the dangers of these new technologies that we still don't know how much they can be applied and how they can be applied, because as we were saying, they can be applied for the good and the bad. So yeah, who would like to address this?
I think just to start, it's also kind of adding on what I've been talking about, is that we don't think that the code is necessarily like tech sensitive, right? If we go back to the values that we're talking about, the principles that we're talking about, those should be applicable regardless of AI use or not. And just to kind of also add is that we've obviously got the existing AI, well, the AI Act, right, that also adds some extra provisions and responsibilities for developers and also the organizations that are deploying systems with AI. So those also are hard law, right? Well, it's an act, so question mark, until it goes to the courts. But that we don't necessarily see it as something that sort of tomorrow will be obsolete, but rather because of the way that it's developed, is very much something that can be combined. And when the next technology comes, we also still think that the values, the principles that we set out in the code of conduct would be very much applicable.
Alina?
I think there are some principles, even though we are not really naming it out. I think there are, especially if you look in a higher level at the principles, you see that even though we are not naming it AI, we already are aware of the heavily influence in production workflows enhanced by AI. For instance, if you look at Article 6, here in the 8th point, I think potential reskinning, informed consent, especially in a mixed reality environment where without your consent, you might be perceived differently. And this is heavily, obviously, influenced by large language models and machine learning. So even though we are not naming it out AI, you will see, as well as in the higher principles, but even in the articles, we are aware of, for instance, this is just one example, reskinning is one part, but there are other articles that are also infused by it. So we are aware of it, but we are not naming it out because we see the convergence and the huge influence in production workflow already today by AI. So I think we are not naming it out because for us, it's the convergence. So it's seen as one. Even if you look at the AI Act, XR is not as representative. But I think it's important that it is part, even in the code of conduct, without naming it out explicitly.
Of course.
And then just to quickly read over the preamble, the last sentence is, the code is designed to ensure that these technologies respect human rights, protect user privacy, promote inclusivity, and safeguard the mental, physical, and social well-being of all users. I think that should be applicable regardless of if it has AI or doesn't have AI.
So for the people who are joining now, I will put back the link to the code of conduct. So if you scan this QR code, you can further read the code of conduct and go into details about the proposed points and everything. So we have one more question from the forum, which is whether this code of conduct will make any real difference in fast-paced commercial environments. What practical advice would you give a startup funder trying to apply the code under pressure? Alina, Melissa, who would like to go first?
I mean, we are aware that there are a lot of industrial influence code of conducts already out there, but I think this is really one that is universal, and also most existing code of conducts also are there to prevent potential misuse. So it's also in regards to the business model that they have in order to secure their IP and save themselves, more or less. But this is a universal one, which I think in general, just providing awareness, not saying this is easy for anyone who is producing, but if you have it in the back of your mind while creating, I think it's also a nice sort of reference, especially when you are in a dilemma, because I mean, most of the time on a daily basis, you are always in this constant dilemma between outer, like you have a client or a boss, and you're in a conflict of creating something good. So I think it could maybe also for every creator help to overcome this inner outer dilemma while creating. Though, to be honest, it's not a yes or no answer. So I think even for a small startup, this might be a way harder challenge to overcome than an established production company.
I think one way to look at it is that it's not necessarily like a blocker of what you shouldn't do, but rather a product quality advice mechanism, right? Have you thought of all of these things? How can you then make sure that it's included in your product cycle? And of course, if you're a startup, your priority is to get the thing to market, right? But I think what we also want to highlight here is that there's a lot of risks and potential liability if you don't do your homework right. And especially with the technology that may have really a lot of consequences into people's mental and physical health. It's not something that developers should take lightly, even if they have that wanting to put their wonderful product to market, right? So we hope that by looking at the articles, especially, they'll be able to prioritize what they can see as critical action points that they should take on as soon as possible, and hopefully something that helps them throughout their production process, and acts like as a building block, right, for them to include it into their design development process.
And because we were talking about quality, there's a question that just came into my mind that is about the rating system in the experience library. Because how does it work? Does the rating work in the experience library, and how you define quality for projects? Alina, that's because you were mentioning about quality and ratings.
Yes. So obviously, if one thrives to upload their experience, there's a set of questions that you have to go through. These questions are already aligned with some of the pointers that we are touching on the code of conduct. Especially since the experience library has been launched before the code of conduct, we are now also making adjustments to the experience library in regards how the experiences are evaluated. There are even parallel activities by some creators that are on an afterthought trying to advance their experience based on the code of conduct regarding accessibility and inclusivity. So there are even some activities now to provide some experiences on how some developers dealt in an afterthought while they already deployed an experience to adjust the experiences based on the code of conduct. So it's an ongoing activity, especially since the experience library was launched in April last year, so heavily before we even started working on the code of conduct. So I would say this is a continuous iterative activity also on the experience library platform and this page. But if somebody tries or wants to upload an experience, there's a huge portfolio of questions. But you shouldn't be scared of them, or that shouldn't haunt you to not upload it. But it's more or less some questions that are in line in regards to the code of conduct.
Melissa, you want to add something on this?
No, I think what we were trying to sort of see, I think, in the original development of this is we know that there's sets of standards for how, for example, games are being rated, right? So how can we also take that into our experience library? And as a user, what would you like to know ahead of participating or downloading an experience, right? So of course, the game settings and the game standards in terms of like violence, for example, is something important to know. But as a user, for example, I would like to know that they've made sure that this experience is developed in a way that is going to minimize, for example, me getting dizzy, right? So these are all sort of important things to take into account that give pointers towards how thoughtful or how well developed an experience is. And that, we've thought about that into designing the checklist.
Very, very nice. And again, I will put up the XR for Human forum. That is the platform where users can ask questions and give feedback and provide opinions on the code of conduct, and also open up discussion about the different topics that touch the code of conduct. And yeah, do you have something to say before we close up this conversation? You had something else you would like to make sure that our audience knows? Alina, Melissa?
I think it's really important to touch upon there might be things that we are actually completely forgot or haven't thought about in the articles. So that's why I think your feedback, everyone who's listening and about to listening to it afterwards, is part of the full clockwork. So it's really important that you provide your feedback and comments, so we can ensure that even pointers that we might have missed are part of the code of conduct, and that it also addresses your needs.
Yeah, we want to hear from industry, from academia, from policymakers. I guess the more opinions that you receive, the more you're able to understand where this kind of conduct is going and how much relevant it is. I think it's already very much relevant. Melissa, any?
Just to add, we need your feedback, and then keep your eyes peeled on the website. All of the deliverables will be uploaded there. And then also we will have a big launch event, I believe in September. So that will be the big final presentation of the code of conduct and the rest of the deliverables. So of course we'll be publicizing it further once we have further details, but also to welcome everybody to join us, I think, in Brussels.
Yes, I mean, for all the people that are following us, of course, we will make sure to spread the word about the event through our newsletter, LinkedIn, Discord. So please make sure that you have a look at the Excel for Human forum, the Excel for Human website, because I'm sure all the information will be there as well. You can see the URL, and if you look on Google, you can find it quite easily. By the way, next week, there's another event, the XR Expo in Stuttgart, and Michael Bongrover will be there. Alina, you will be there as well. It's on the 8th and 9th of May, so 1 week, 2 weeks from now, but no, next week, actually next week. And Michael will be speaking with Anne Bajar at panel. Alina, are you excited with the event? I know you were saying.
I think this is also a nice opportunity for everyone who's listening and want to go into a more in-depth conversation or want to address some in-person feedback. Just grab us there on the expo floor.
Yes.
We're there, and even if you have some direct questions or critical feedback, don't hide. Just approach us. We are going to be there, and we're looking forward to in-depth and lively conversations with everyone in regards to the code of conduct.
Nice. Okay, so I'll pull back the XR code to the code of conduct, the QR code, so that people can still scan it and have a look at the code of conduct. And then we hope that you will stop Michael and Alina during the event, also and future events, not just next week. And please provide all the feedback that we have. We want to build together the code of conduct, and any of feedback or opinion is much appreciated. So don't be shy. Thank you very much, Alina. Thank you, Melissa, for this conversation. It was very inspiring and insightful. Thank you everyone for joining. If you have feedback, again, that's the XR for Human forum. We're going to have more events announced soon here at XR for Europe. There will be one very soon in May, more in June, and we're going also to launch some initiatives very, very soon at XR for Europe. So please follow us on LinkedIn and on YouTube and Discord and the website. We have a lot to give, and we're here to give it to you. So thank you again for joining, and I hope you have a nice day, guys. Everyone, thank you very much.
Thank you for hosting us.
Thank you, Francesco. Highly appreciate you stepping in last minute.
Thank you very much.